Dreams of a professional orchestra for Tacoma, one which both serves its community and puts the city on the artistic map, date back to the 1890s. Early civic boosters knew that before Tacoma could truly become the City of Destiny, the New York of the West, or any of the other grand names given to our young city, musical achievement at the highest level was a necessary part of the landscape. The first efforts to form a professional orchestra in Tacoma began when Swedish-American violinist and conductor Olaf Bull arrived in 1890 to serve as conductor for the new Tacoma Theater, a venue dubbed the finest temple on the coast. He fell in love with the natural beauty of our region, even becoming the first person to play the violin at the summit of Mount Rainier. Although he had offers to continue his career in other cities, Bull remained in Tacoma for the rest of his life and was involved in several efforts to form a professional orchestra for his adopted hometown. In those early years, fundraising proved difficult, and his fledgling orchestra, the first to use the name Tacoma Symphony, never quite got off the ground. The next attempt came with the formation of the Tacoma Civic Orchestra in 1925. This community ensemble was founded by David P. Nason, director of music curriculum for the Tacoma Public Schools. Where Olaf Bull had failed to pull together enough interested musicians and financial support to build an orchestra, Nason succeeded, at least for a time. For membership in the volunteer orchestra, he recruited not only professional musicians, but also some of the more talented students from Tacoma's high schools. He programmed the Tacoma Civic Orchestra's concerts to include the same pieces students were studying in school, and frequently collaborated with local radio stations and music stores as well. In spite of Nason's energy, musicianship, and expertise in building community relationships, the orchestra folded just a few years after its creation, in 1928. In September 1933, a talented young conductor named Eugene Linden hitchhiked from Portland to Tacoma with $5 in his pocket and a plan to start his own orchestra. Tacoma, he later explained, was, quote, the only place on the Pacific coast that could support an orchestra and didn't have one. Linden never doubted he would succeed, even in the thick of the Great Depression. Just 3 musicians attended his first rehearsal. According to Linden, quote, no musicians would have been a failure. 3 was a beginning. Within a few months, he had assembled an ensemble of 65 musicians, with initial rehearsals held at Ted Brown Music and the Winthrop Hotel. The new orchestra's first concert was held on March 17, 1934. The musicians were amateurs, and they were performing on a temporary stage in a school auditorium, but their performances of Mendelssohn and Beethoven were welcomed by the audience of 800 with a 15-minute standing ovation. The Tacoma Philharmonic Orchestra was born. Musicians were not paid during the first 2 years of the organization's existence. Linden donated his time as well, commuting, sometimes hitchhiking, from Portland. Linden continued to conduct the Tacoma Philharmonic even during the turbulent World War II years. By 1951, facing budget challenges, the Tacoma Philharmonic's board of directors decided to become a presenting organization. This meant that it would no longer support a resident orchestra, but rather would bring touring musicians to town for concerts. Each of these early efforts to sustain an orchestra in Tacoma ultimately failed. It was not until December of 1946 that a performance of Handel's Messiah at the College of Puget Sound would establish an ensemble which would grow and change with our city for the next 75 years, the orchestra known today as Symphony Tacoma. That first concert was led by conductor Raymond Vaught, professor of violin at the College of Puget Sound. The school's music department invited all people in the community with any instrumental talent to consider joining the orchestra. Over the next decade, with the steady sponsorship of the college, the orchestra presented 3 concerts per year, with CPS students performing alongside community members. In 1959, violinist and conductor Ed Safarian joined the faculty of the University of Puget Sound and took the reins of the UPS Tacoma Symphony. Ed and his wife Jan, an operatic soprano, had never even heard of Tacoma before making the move, but would devote the rest of their lives to expanding musical opportunities for students and audiences here. Safarian's immediate priorities were to raise artistic standards and broaden publicity. He was adamant about two things. Concerts would have free admission, and the orchestra would regularly feature internationally renowned artists as soloists. This unique combination would set the Tacoma Symphony apart from its peer community orchestras around the nation. All of this work required financial backing, and the Tacoma Symphony Women, a group organized in 1964, stepped up to fill this important fundraising role. Hosting everything from luncheons and tea parties to an annual holiday homes tour where guests could hear musicians performing live as they visited grand homes in the community, the Tacoma Symphony Women were successful in multiple ways. In addition to raising the funds needed to keep concerts free, the group also raised the profile of the orchestra in the community by holding their events in spaces throughout the city. Throughout the 1960s, the orchestra performed in a variety of community venues, from churches and school auditoriums to the large stage of the Temple Theater. Safarian's programming continued to highlight both local musicians and world-class visiting artists, and premieres of new works by local composers occasionally graced the stage alongside more traditional orchestral repertoire. In the spring of 1971, the ensemble performed for the last time as the UPS Tacoma Symphony. When the next season opened in October 1971, featuring a world premiere by Tacoma composer Leroy Ostransky, the orchestra taking the stage was now called the Tacoma Symphony Orchestra. Although the University of Puget Sound continued to provide support for many years to come, this was an important step in establishing the orchestra as an independent artistic organization. During the 1977-78 season, thanks to the collective efforts of the Tacoma Musicians Union, Local 117 of the American Federation of Musicians, orchestra members were paid for the first time, another important step towards professionalizing the orchestra. In 1983, the Tacoma community celebrated as the historic Pantages Theater reopened following renovations, becoming a new home to the Tacoma Symphony. By 1986, free admission was no longer possible, but Ed Safarian had successfully overseen the orchestra's transition to a professional ensemble with widespread community support and a stunning historic theater to call home. In March of 1994, Safarian conducted the orchestra for the last time, stepping down after 35 years. During the 1993-94 season, several guest conductors led the orchestra's concerts as part of a nationwide search for Safarian's successor. On September 30th, 1994, Harvey Felder took the podium as the new conductor of the Tacoma Symphony, a position he would hold for 20 years. Maestro Felder brought to Tacoma a professionalism, charm, and compelling artistic vision that together would continue to raise the profile of the orchestra. His mission was to create a Tacoma Symphony sound, one defined by artistic vitality and rhythmic precision. Felder, passionate about youth education, greatly expanded the symphony's youth concert program. He also oversaw the development of the Tacoma Symphony Chorus, now called Tacoma Symphony Voices, and expanded the number of concert offerings each year. Upon his departure in 2014, Felder was given the title of Conductor Laureate.
"20 years is a long time for a music director, and I guess the average for music directors is 7 or 8 years, and so I've doubled that and some. So clearly, this is my home. This is a body of work, represents a body of work that helped shape me and shape my musical sensibilities. So leaving this will be a major change, a major life change. I didn't think it would be 20 years, but this was a different situation. This was being hired to build something. It was a project.
Harvey came with a mission to the board, and he wanted to create a sound that was Tacoma Symphony sound.
What I was very concerned about initially were the fundamentals of music making. Precise rhythm, accurate rhythm, a rhythm that gives the ensemble a vitality. The next step, ensemble. Having a sense of this side of the orchestra, very aware of that side of the orchestra. Sounds basic, but it wasn't necessarily in place at the beginning. I will miss Tacoma and miss the patrons and the people who've supported the orchestra over the years, and miss the orchestra members. So yeah, it'll be a major transition. Last time.
In 2014, Symphony Tacoma welcomed music director Sarah Ioannidis, whom the Los Angeles Times has called, quote, one of 6 female conductors breaking the glass podium. Building on the orchestra's long tradition of serving its community, Ioannidis has continued to expand the orchestra's education programs. She has also championed new works, often through collaborative projects with other artistic organizations in the Tacoma community.
How can we go anywhere without music? How could we take music out of human nature? It's part of us, and that's why it's so important. Music is just so life-affirming. When we hear something and we are moved to tears or inspired, we know it touched something in us. To my students, I'm their teacher. For my children, I'm their mother. To my orchestra, I'm their conductor, and I'm music director of Symphony Tacoma. I'm constantly motivated, I'd say inspired by people, by stories, by history, by where we live, the extraordinary nature of our world. I've done all sorts of projects musically, as a performer, as a collaborator, as a curator of programs. I really love commissioning works, bringing creative new pieces to light. When I look at creating projects, I'm really connecting the dots, and I look to the resources of what does the community love, what does it care about, what does it have. Recently we did Beethoven 9. This is just as important as it was in Beethoven's day. You know, brotherhood and sharing of our common understanding. And this is where we have to look, is to the common ground. I'm motivated by the mission. And for me that mission is helping us understand each other and music is a greater tool as any. I think that is the greatest thing that music can do, is to bring people together, mind, heart, and soul.
As Ioannidis begins her 7th season as music director, the orchestra's core season now includes 6 main series classical concerts, holiday choral pops, an annual performance of Handel's Messiah, and a spring choral concert. With a stated mission of building community through music, Symphony Tacoma celebrates this diamond anniversary season and looks forward to many more years of sharing music with the people of Tacoma.